This is a Podfic reading for But If You Believe the Magic of Christmas Eve by OllieCollie on AO3, part 1 of the So This Is Christmas series. Summary. Why didn't you say something sooner? Tony asks. I could have bought you an entire Christmas tree farm 5 years ago if you'd asked. Pepper rolls her eyes. I don't need a Christmas tree farm. Just one single tree and some nice decorations would do. All right, fine. I just don't see the point. It's not like we have kids around to enjoy it. Pepper lifts an eyebrow. Are you implying that's something you'd like? Chapter 1. It isn't that Tony Stark hates Christmas. He has nothing against the holiday itself. It's just never meant much to him. Growing up, his family didn't have big traditions like all of his friends did, and his parents weren't particularly over the top when it came to celebrating. Plus, the Starks didn't have any relatives around to spend the holidays with, and his father often was away on business trips. So, more often than not, aside from the lavish decorations and adorning the mansion, and some gifts, Christmas didn't differ much from any other day. As he got older, Christmas became about the parties. To be honest, everything was about the parties for young adult Tony. He more often than not spent winter break with boatloads of girls and drinks and whatever else he fancied. There were some good memories, like that Christmas he'd spent with Rhodey's family, but overall, there was just never anything special about the day. And now, although Tony is in a much better place, the holiday season still doesn't seem like something to get all tied up over the way people seem to. He's a businessman himself, and between all the chaos of running a company and being Iron Man and saving the world a couple of times, Christmas is just never high on his priority list. Except when it comes to buying gifts for Pepper. That he can do. But other than that, in the years they've been together, neither he nor Pep have really gone out of their way to celebrate. So, when his wife suggests getting a real Christmas tree this year, instead of the short, skinny plastic one they've used for the past several Christmases, Tony can't deny that he's a little surprised. You don't like the tree we have? What's wrong with the one we have? Nothing's wrong with it, Tony, Pepper says, shaking her head as she chops up vegetables at the kitchen island counter. I just thought it might be nice if we did something different. Tony squints at her. Okay, he says slowly. Any specific reason why? She just shrugs. I happen to like Christmas, and I think a real tree and some decorations would be a nice change this year. You never wanted a real tree before. You don't like them. So come on, what gives? Pepper gives him a look before returning her gaze to the cutting board. No, I never said I didn't like real trees before. You like to assume things, you know. Well, what, am I supposed to read your mind? You never said you did want one either. She didn't, right? Tony racks his brain for any conversation where that topic came up. No, he's pretty sure he didn't miss anything. Although he has noticed Pepper's tendency to point out all of the lights and trees and other decorations and windows whenever they go out. She's done that for years, though. They go by Rockefeller Center every Christmas to enjoy the ginormous tree there. Why didn't you say something sooner? He asks. I could have bought you an entire Christmas tree farm 5 years ago if you'd asked. Pepper rolls her eyes. I don't need a Christmas tree farm. Just one single tree and some nice decorations would do. All right, fine. I just don't see the point. It's not like we have kids around to enjoy it. Pepper lifts an eyebrow. Are you implying that's something you'd like? What? No. Tony says immediately, eyes widening. That's not what I'm saying at all. Just giving reasons why I don't think hauling a whole messy tree that belongs outdoors up to the penthouse makes the most sense. Me wanting it isn't enough for you? Oh no, dear, it's plenty enough. A smile plays on Pepper's lips as she transfers a chopped onion to a pan and turns back to start on slicing the next. You're a Grinch. she informs him matter-of-factly. Tony finds himself oddly offended at the probably accurate accusation. I am not a Grinch, he protests. I'm just busy. More important things to worry about than putting up a tree and setting out little snowmen figurines that only stay up a couple of weeks at most, you know? You do know. You're the CEO of SI. Pepper sets the knife down on the cutting board and uses the back of her hand to brush some loose strands of hair out of her face. So is that a no, then? It's not a no. Tony isn't sure why this seems to be such a big deal to Pepper all of a sudden. It's not a big deal, Tony. We don't have to... Nope. Tony steps around the counter and places his hands on her hips. If you want a tree, beautiful lady, you will get a tree. The absolute biggest one I can find. Pepper smiles and rolls her eyes, wiping her hands on a nearby dishcloth before draping her arms over his shoulders. Average size will do. Tony leans in, tugging her closer and smirking. Since when is anything I do for you average? She laughs. He may not understand his wife's desire for the penthouse to become a winter wonderland just a few short days before Christmas, but what Pepper wants, Tony gives. He loves her too much for anything else. Besides, as much as he might try to deny it, as a kid, Tony always thought it would be fun to go pick out a tree and decorate it. Now, it still sort of seems like a pointless waste of time and money, but it isn't like he doesn't have the cash to spare. And a nice, quiet Christmas together with Pep actually sounds really nice. So, a Christmas tree this year it is. Peter Parker is all alone. 14 and homeless on Christmas Eve, and not a single person in the entire world who cares. The cold, biting air only sort of numbs the pain and grief that reside in his chest as he trudges down the icy streets of New York. The crowds are thinning as the day wears on, everyone returning to their homes to spend the evening with their families. Still, as Peter wanders, he sees little kids giggling and ice skating, adults rushing around doing last-minute shopping in preparation for the big day, couples huddling together for warmth as they stroll down the sidewalk. He hugs his arms around himself as a particularly cold gust of wind rushes over him, his tattered jacket doing little to protect him from winter's brutal elements. If he keeps moving, he doesn't really notice the way he can't feel his fingers and toes. If he wasn't so exhausted, he'd be out swinging around just to keep the blood flowing. Peter has already spent most of the day out patrolling, ensuring everyone is having a safe and happy holiday. He'd even got a hot chocolate out of assisting an elderly couple carrying a heavy load of last-minute groceries for their big Christmas dinner. The warm drink had been heavenly. There was also a sort of bittersweet interaction after he'd rescued a runaway dog from getting hit by a car. "Thank you so much, Spiderman!" A young girl with 2 missing teeth grins up at him with relief as she hugs the brown and white puppy to her chest. "Merry Christmas!" Next to the girl, her grateful father nods in agreement, adding, "Any plans for the holiday? Family? Friends?" Peter tries to play off the stabbing pain in his heart at the well-intentioned words. Well, you know," he says, shrugging. "I'll be busy out here. Always people to help." The man's smile wanes a bit, compassion in his eyes as he claps Peter on the shoulder. "Don't forget to take care of yourself, Spidey." Yeah, of course." Peter responds with an exaggerated nod. "Weather's supposed to be getting worse later on tonight. I'd make sure you get home before too late." "Right, will do." Peter doesn't bother to mention that home is kind of non-existent term for him at the moment, though to be fair, the whole homeless shtick is kind of his own fault. The most recent foster family he'd been with hadn't been so bad, at least not compared to the others over the last year. They were going to send him to respite care just for the holidays, as they had plans to go on a cruise, but there were no available openings for him. No one who wanted to take in a teenager with a reputation for being a troublemaker for Christmas. And then he'd gotten caught sneaking out, again, and they'd decided, just like all the others, that they couldn't continue fostering him anyway, even after they returned from their Christmas cruise. Faced with the choice of a group home for boys that's essentially synonymous with juvie, or the cold New York streets, Peter knew he had to take his chances with the latter. He wasn't going to get locked away with no way to go out and help people as Spiderman. It had only been a few days since he'd disappeared with nothing more than the clothes on his back and in his bag, and he's not so sure anyone's spending much time looking for him. Still, when he's not in the suit, he finds himself constantly looking over his shoulder, waiting for someone to grab him and drag him back to a place where no one wants him anyway. Fear of getting caught is part of the reason why he's been doing his best to avoid stopping at homeless shelters. Besides that, those types of places are probably all packed out, and Peter doesn't want to take away a bed and a meal from someone else who needs it. He can make do. He only wishes he didn't have to. He just wants a home, a family. Why is that so much to ask? Aunt May always used to tell him that wishing and Christmas always go together. That Christmas was a wonderful time to make wishes. The magic of the season always helped to make even the silliest wishes come true. After the way the last year had gone, Peter isn't so sure he believes that anymore. But he can't help but remember all the Christmases he and May would sit on the couch in front of the tree and silently make their wishes. Peter didn't make a wish last year. Everything was still too fresh, too raw. Last Christmas was all a grief-filled haze, but he does recall swearing off Christmas, wishing one anger-filled night, telling himself there's just no point. Why bother to make a wish that will never come true? So he doesn't know why, as he stared at his tousled street urchin reflection in a store window, the memories of past Christmas wishes won't leave him alone. Maybe it's the need to keep his aunt close to him somehow, even though she's gone. Maybe it's just pure desperation. Whatever the reason, Peter finds himself closing his eyes and letting the impossible wish have free rein in his mind. I wish I had someone to love me. He's lonely. He misses his aunt's hugs, his uncle's life lessons, and even though he doesn't remember them well anymore, his parents' voices. There's a bitter chill that resides in him now, down in his very core, and it has nothing to do with the snow and sub-freezing temperatures outside. It's the ache of sadness, the ache of fading hope that anything will ever be okay again. Peter opens his eyes and looks at his reflection again. There's a smudge of dirt on his cheek, and his beanie is almost too small, but at least it covers his ears. His gaze wanders to the shoppers beyond the window's holiday display, to the bustling crowd inside, and he lets himself imagine for a moment that May and Ben are inside picking up some last-minute groceries because the first attempt at Christmas Eve dinner was a disaster. A smile tugs at the corners of his mouth before it disappears, taking any warmth the little daydream had brought with it and snuffing it out like a candle. Peter sniffles and continues wandering aimlessly down the street. He'll need to find some place to spend the night if he wants to avoid freezing to death. He looks in the windows of apartment buildings and houses as he passes, finding himself unconsciously searching, hoping he might see one with the big Christmas tree and pretty decorations, but no kids. That maybe, by some miracle, there will be someone like his aunt and uncle who would be willing to let a teenager stay with them, even just for a day or two. The idea is as ridiculous as it is impossible. There's an older woman sitting on a bench as he passes, a bouquet of red and green balloons in one hand. She smiles kindly at him. "Would you like a balloon?" Peter fingers the few cold coins that reside in his pocket. He really shouldn't, all things considered. There are more important things to spend money on, like food and shelter. But then again, the pennies won't afford him anything. Not even a can of cold soup or beans. Why not? It isn't as though he has anything left to lose. Besides, May loved balloons, and the thought of the joy a silly, air-filled piece of plastic could bring even a grown adult is almost enough to push a smile onto his face. "Sure," he finally says, voice quiet and a little hoarse as he steps forwards to retrieve the prize. "I'll take a red one, please." The lady nods and smiles as she exchanges Peter's money for one of the brightly coloured balloons. "Merry Christmas," she says. Peter returns the smile, though he's sure he looks much more tired and sad, if how he's feeling inside is anything to go by. "Same to you," he manages, forcing back the tears that want to burst forth. They're always teetering on the edge these days. It isn't long before the sun begins to drift westward, the grey clouds in the sky blocking out most of the light anyway, as snow begins to drift from above in gentle flurries. The already freezing temperatures are dropping even more rapidly, and Peter recognises his body begin to drift into shutdown mode. He needs to find somewhere to hole up before he collapses. Ever since the spider bite, he's had a difficult time regulating his temperature. Spending hours outside in a northern winter that would harm a human with regular DNA isn't exactly the smartest thing he's ever done, but it isn't like he has many options. "It's so cold," Peter murmurs to nobody in particular, trembling. He finally ducks into an alley and hides behind a dumpster, tying his balloon to the handle to keep it from flying away. He digs through his backpack and gingerly pulls on a homemade spider suit. It's not much, the material thin and worn, but it's better than nothing. He tugs his jacket and pants on over it, trying to suppress the shivers that are racking his body, and wishing he had more layers to keep out the cold. "Okay, Pete," he whispers, clenching his jaw against his chattering teeth. "You can do this. Just find somewhere to lie down for a bit." But despite his efforts, moving seems to require too much energy. He glances across the alley and finds an old tarp lying half across the dumpster, along with a few empty boxes or crates. He manages to tug the tarp into a position that blocks the bit of wind that the alley doesn't, and wedges himself underneath it between a couple of boxes. He hugs his backpack close to his chest in an attempt to draw at least a little more warmth. "I'll just rest here for a bit, and then I'll have to go stop at one of the shelters," he thinks. "Just long enough to warm up." But as Peter's eyes drift shut, he knows deep down that there's a good chance that if he goes to sleep now, he might not wake up. He doesn't know if he cares. Maybe, when he opens his eyes again, he'll be warm. His family will be there to welcome him with open arms. That actually sounds really nice. Come to think of it, Peter's sort of starting to feel warm even now, though it seems impossible considering the fact that it's below freezing outside, and not much better in this little haven he's found. He vaguely registers the fact that it's probably not a good thing, but his exhausted, grief-infused mind drifts off before he can consider it long enough to worry. Tony grumbles under his breath as he makes his way down the busy sidewalk, dodging tourists and residents as they all rush to and fro on their last-minute errands before the holiday. His baseball cap and sunglasses probably look rather out of place on a cloudy, snowy day, but it's better than walking around the streets as an easily recognisable Tony Stark. Not that he minds the attention, it's just inconvenient sometimes. Like now, when he's trying to hurry back to the penthouse with his and Pepper's coffee before the liquids turn to Java-flavoured popsicles. Never mind that they have all kinds of gourmet coffee in the penthouse, none of which require going out into the freezing weather on Christmas Eve to visit an overcrowded coffee shop. But Pepper had specifically requested a peppermint mocha from the brew house, and since she was busy preparing their Christmas Eve dinner for two, Tony had opted to be the one to run down the street and pick up their drinks. The sidewalks aren't completely crowded, but there are enough people making their way through the streets that Tony is having to thread his way back towards the tower. ducking around and past the slow-moving tourists with a Christmas-themed cup in each hand. Unfortunately, he's not the only one with some place to be in a hurry. As Tony maneuvers his way past a storefront to get around a group of college-aged kids, someone is exiting the building. The door flies open without warning, slamming into Tony's elbow and causing him to stumble with the force of the unexpected hit. One of his coffees goes flying and the other is crushed in his hand as he staggers to the side in an attempt to regain his balance. He lets out a loud swear as the scalding hot liquid splashes over his fingers. The cup lands on the ground and rolls a few feet before coming to a stop right next to the other one, the last of the coffee pouring out like a sad waterfall. Tony blinks a few times as the shock wears off. He whirls around, hoping to catch a glimpse of the idiot who just robbed him of his Christmas cheer, but they must have already disappeared into the crowd. Around him, no one else seems to particularly notice or care that his day has just taken a sharp downward turn, either. People pass by, simply sliding around the random guy in a baseball cap and sunglasses, staring down at two empty coffee cups in the middle of the sidewalk. Finally, with a long, heavy sigh and a few more choice words, Tony stoops down and snatches the offending cups off the ground, stacking them together and shoving the lids inside. Now he has to either go back to the cafe or return home empty-handed. Knowing how Pepper can be about her coffee, the latter isn't really an option. So Tony turns around and stomps back towards the direction from which he'd just come, any remaining trace of a good mood disappearing. This is why I hate people, he mutters to himself, spotting an open dumpster near the front of an alleyway as he passes. He changes direction, heading to throw the cups away. There's a random balloon floating in the alley, tethered to the dumpster, which is odd to say the least. Then again, it is New York. But when Tony takes one final step forward as he tosses the trash into the dumpster, his foot connects with something solid, and it lets out a surprised yelp. Tony startles back. What the? He glances down, expecting to see an angry alley cat or some other animal at his feet. The lump unfurls from its hidden position under the pile of tarp and litter, and it's much too big to be an animal. With no small amount of surprise, Tony realizes it's a person. Not just a person, a whole freaking kid. Sorry, sir, the boy stutters out, desperately clambering to his feet as he adjusts the black beanie that sits on his head. There's a cut above his eyebrow and his movements are slow and uncoordinated, like his limbs aren't quite able to catch up with his brain. Sorry, I wasn't trying to. I'm not staying here. Are you okay? Tony asks, stupidly, because it's pretty clear the kid is anything but okay. Yes, sir, I'm fine. I was just stopping here for a minute. I'll... Tony opens his mouth to interrupt, but as the kid stands fully upright, his unzipped jacket falls open, exposing a glimpse of red and blue, along with a familiar spider emblem. A quick glance at the kid's wrists confirms Tony's suspicions, the glint of some sort of metal contraptions peeking out from under his two short sleeves. So that's how he gets around. The kid's just staring at Tony, like he's looking right through him, and it's honestly kind of creeping him out. Tony clears his throat. So, you're the Spiderling, crime-fighting spider. The kid's tired brown eyes double in size at the words. What? No, I'm not. He pulls his jacket tight around himself and crosses his arms, shaking his head rapidly. I'm not. Tony lifts a single eyebrow. Uh-huh. Almost had me there, DiCaprio. The kid audibly swallows and takes a step back, looking ready to bolt, though his legs don't seem all that steady, and Tony doubts he'd make it far. He puts his hands up in surrender, hoping to de-escalate the situation. No need to panic, your secret's safe with me. I just want to talk. Spiderman has been on Tony's radar ever since he popped up in Queens, saving people from muggings and helping old ladies cross the street. Tony has had Friday keeping tabs on the guy. Probably could have dug up his identity within a few days if he'd really wanted. He was intrigued by the superhero wannabe, sure, but there have been more important things to worry about than a vigilante running around New York in a onesie. The spiderling seemed harmless enough, anyway. But now he's staring at him face to face, and Tony does not like what he sees one bit, because this isn't some college student or young adult running around fighting criminals. You're, what, 12? The kid stares down at his shoes, scuffing the toe of his shoe against the ground. 14, he mutters quietly, as if that's any better. Where are your parents, huh? They know about this? The kid's face darkens and he presses his lips together. Lips that Tony notes are blue. Not only that, he's quaking so hard he looks like he might fall over at any given moment. He frowns. Seriously, kid, what are you doing out here? It's freezing. Gee, thanks. I hadn't noticed. Tony lifts his eyebrows at the sarcasm-infused retort. Go on, then, he says, waving a hand aimlessly in front of him. Get home and stay out of trouble. Enjoy your Christmas. He'll just check back into all of this once the holiday is over. Figure out what in the world he's supposed to do with the revelation that Spiderman is a literal child. Yes, sir, I'd love to, if I had one. The muttered words are quiet, but roll off the kid's tongue with all the bitterness of a person who's lost everything. That stops Tony short. You don't have a place to go? No, I'm just sleeping under this dumpster for fun. It's really comfortable, actually. It's easy to see that the scathing retorts are a defense mechanism, carefully constructed to put up a barrier between himself and the outside world. Tony knows because he's done the same thing for years. If he looks beyond the surface, it's pretty obvious the kid is close to a breakdown. He looks half frozen too, which is probably why he's still standing here rather than on a rooftop a mile away. Okay, shoot. Tony's mind is racing, trying to catch up and process everything that's happened in the last 2 minutes. This is absolutely not how he expected his Christmas Eve to go. He pulls his sunglasses from his face and rubs at the bridge of his nose. What now? Call the police? Just let the kid go? All I wanted was a cup of coffee. When he finally glances up again, the kid is staring at him open-mouthed. You're Tony Stark, he chokes out. Yep, surprise! The man, the myth, the legend at your service. But I shouldn't. The kid tries to pull away and slips in his haste, nearly taking a nosedive into the cement. Tony reaches out and grabs his arm to steady him. Whoa, easy there, Happy Feet. The kid looks equal parts terrified and starstruck as he takes another step backwards, his breath coming out in quick little puffs. What? I don't... Were you... He curls in on himself, chest heaving as he practically starts to hyperventilate. Whoa, hey, let's just calm down for a second. Big, deep breaths, all that jazz. Not helpful, Tony's mind supplied. But what else is he going to do? Thankfully, the kid follows his instructions, exhaling a shaky but long, slowed breath. Good. Great. In an effort to distract the kid, and hopefully avoid the onset of another panic attack, Tony asks, You got a name? The kid's lips twist into a frown. Come on, you know mine. I think it's only fair we make this a two-way street. The kid hesitates for a moment longer, taking another shuddery breath before finally answering, resignation in his voice like he knows Tony will find out eventually anyway. Peter Parker. Well, Mr. Parker, it's a pleasure to meet you. Now, let's get you out of this weather before I have to watch you turn into a human ice cube. Peter blinks in surprise. What? You're not going to call? He trails off, like he's not really sure what to insert after that. Police? CPS? The government? Tony just shrugs. If we stand out here any longer, we'll need a coroner. So no, you can come home with me. What? Peter's eyes widen before narrowing in suspicion. He shakes his head. Thank you, Mr. Stark, but I'm fine, really. I don't know what your definition of fine is, but whatever it is, I disagree. This, Tony waves his hands in a circular motion at the teen in front of him, is not fine. So come on. I don't know about you, but I'm done standing in the snow. Peter sits back on his heels, clearly mulling it over. For a moment, Tony thinks the kid is going to make a run for it, but then Peter's shoulders drop suddenly, like the weight of the world is sitting on them. It might be the harsh wind, but Tony swears he catches moisture glistening in the kid's eyes. Okay, Peter finally whispers, chin down but gaze lifting to meet Tony's. Okay.